The first time I ran across Love and Rockets, I was probably 14 or 15 years old. It was most likely 1984 or 1985. Love and Rockets issue number 10 had just come out. I had been collecting comic books, of course, and I was actually struck by the cover, which was just a series of squares with all these different characters, kind of a precursor to issue 20, which we did on our skirt. And I was intrigued. There were all these, punk rock characters and stuff, so I said, okay, I'm gonna buy this, take it home. And I was actually in shock. I had been reading comic books for a couple of years at that point, but this was, Love and Rockets, I guess, is technically a comic book, but it's really, a story, and so I'm actually start crying. Written by these two brothers, Jaime and Gilbert Hernandez, and they tell stories about women, ultimately. And I was so, blown away by the first issue. Went home, immediately cut my hair like Hopi, one of the characters in one of Jaime's stories, and just a devotee ever since. I mean, it's really rare to find male writers who are that adept, and especially at the age they were then, in the 80s, at writing women. Love and Rockets is still going. It has its 35th anniversary this year, and it was just a huge part of my life, basically. Well, yeah, and I think like anything, sometimes when you're living in a culture and a culture is a certain way, you don't maybe notice that women aren't represented in comics until you find a comic where women are not just represented, but where the stories are about them, and not just about them, but their lives, their outer lives, their inner lives, their hopes, their dreams, their feelings, their relationships with each other. There are toxic relationships in Love and Rockets, and there are great relationships in Love and Rockets. There are complicated relationships between women in Love and Rockets. And that's not something, and I think to a huge extent even now, it's not something you see in comics. So the Hernandez brothers, were not just trailblazers, but are still standouts, I believe, in the industry. And Fantagraphics Books tells us that they have pretty much a 50-50 male-female readership, and that's due in huge part to Love and Rockets and the stories that they tell about women. I think there is a slight correlation in the way Pinup Girl does things versus the Hernandez brothers. And yes, one's a comic and one's a clothing company. But if there's one thing that comes through in the Hernandez brothers, it's their empathy and compassion. I don't think that men would be able to write about women unless they had that strong sense of empathy and understanding of kind of the universality of experience. That, women's lives and men's lives are actually not that different. We each have different challenges, and we each express differently, or, but ultimately, they're able to see that there is a universality in experience. And I think that Pinup Girl, we base what we do on that same universality of experience, between women who we mostly sell to. And, that is why it never occurred to us to make a different range for a plus size customer than we would for a straight size customer, a basic size customer, because I don't believe that you would need to cut or make a different style for different body types. If you're making a great dress, that should be able to work on anyone if it's done correctly. So I think in that term, in that aspect, where I think the Hernandez brothers did not let the fact that they were men stop them from writing about women, because they understood that we are pretty much all one, and we all feel and have the same hopes and dreams. We weren't going to let anything stop us, and we were not going to limit ourselves and say we only make clothing for this type of woman. We make clothing for all women. We're doing 3 prints with the Hernandez brothers. When I first contacted, well, I did not contact them. We're going to start. My friend and collaborator, Sarah Dyer, who's the creator of Action Girl Comics, and is also married to comics creator Evan Dorkin of Milk and Cheese and Beast of Burden fame. These guys already have an existing relationship with the Hernandez brothers. I knew of them. I've met them a couple of times, but I'm just a disgusting fangirl. In fact, I live just a few blocks away from Jaime Hernandez, and sometimes I see him walking around and I won't say hi to this day because I'm so shy. I'm just like, oh, there he goes. Okay. But so Sarah and I talked about this as just, you know, our greatest dream, if we could get these guys to do work for us. And initially we didn't have any direct Love and Rockets ideas in mind. We thought, well, you know, I love their art, I love what they do, and so I suggested to each of them, I thought space pinups for Gilbert, because some of the early stories were very science fiction based, and you would have, you know, people fighting war, you know, fighting crime in space, and I think even Penny Century becomes a superhero, even though she's Jaime, but whatever. And in Jaime's stories, there's a lot of a tie-in with female wrestlers, luchadores, and as a, you know, teenage white girl on the East Coast, I knew nothing about Mexican wrestling and the culture until I read Love and Rockets. So I loved the idea of a lady wrestler print. I don't think it's been done before, and I love the Space Babes idea. So we suggested those and started developing those. And then one day, and this speaks to my OCD, I think, in a pretty clear way, I was on Instagram and I had gone to the explore page. Hey, let's explore. And this little, you know, I don't even know if it's 1 inch by 1 inch on your phone, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch little thumbnail is, I see it, and it's a string of these characters, you know, 2 rows of characters. And I just clicked on it. I'm like, is this what I think it is? And it wasn't inked, it was just the original art for issue number 20. I click on it and it's Carol Hernandez, her post, and it's Dance Party. It's just, they said, we just found this art. And I went, oh my God, and I tagged Sarah and I just wrote border print. And everyone said, yes. So we did it. So that one was just complete serendipity. I happened to be looking at Instagram at the right exact moment. But I'm just so thrilled because I feel that, you know, of course, I think with all comic book artists, most, you know, the best comic book artists, I believe, really deserve to have more exposure, because, you know, you don't have a lot of opportunities for these comic book people to be exposed to things outside of comics. And so that's why, you know, working with people like Evan and Sarah and the Hernandez brothers and Stephanie Buscema, who all are part of the comics world, you know, I'm so excited to do that, because, you know, it's my opportunity to bring their art to a much wider audience, or a different audience as well. We do have some crossover, but I'm just really excited to be able to do that.